Hello, everyone, and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. We are back to talk about Cathay after the phenomenal trailer that we've seen for Warhammer Total War 3 and all of the units and rules and things that have appeared out of that. I'm joined again by Jeremy.
Hi, Dan. It's good to be back on the show.
It's great to have you back, mate. Just really excited to be talking about what's been going on, really. So we're going to talk about Cathay, what we know about them in terms of Warhammer lore and what we've got from the books. Obviously, not too much. And then we're going to go through the trailer, the units that we've seen, and what we might like to see on the tabletop from that. But just before we get into that, a lot of people have been asking me, is this available as a podcast or where can I get the audio? And I have put it up on Anchor FM. And there's going to be a link down in the description if you want to follow that, if you're interested in getting the audio. Other than that, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it, Jeremy.
Sounds good.
What do we know about Cathay?
Well, we've known a bit about Cathay since pretty much like the second edition of the book, so back in the 80s, but it's often just been like a bit of rumour and hearsay. We were just chatting before we started recording about when we first came across it, and I was convinced that we'd had something in one of the old game versions we played, and I found it eventually in 7th edition. There's like a small paragraph. If you want to find it, it's on page 202, which is because a little bit of extract.
So that's in the 7th edition rulebook, is that, Jeremy?
This is the 7th edition rulebook, yeah, absolutely. But basically, it's sort of it goes into saying how in the old world, little's known about this empire, apart from the fact that it was believed it was to be ruled by a celestial dragon empire, who was actually a dragon in human form, and that it was the largest empire in the world with untold millions of subjects. It references a great bastion, a massive wall that sort of protects the empire from the forces of chaos. Has huge armies of warriors from across lands, ranging from strange warrior monks to disciplined armies, heavily armored warriors, and ornate cannons. And that's pretty much all we had really for a very long time. But that's all changed now.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things mentioned in the lore here and there. There was a little bit of chatter from the burgomeisters of the empire who used to trade along the Silk Road and things that they would hear from there. And there are tales of different units and, as you said, dragons and things like that. The only thing that I can remember in terms of models that was influenced by Cathay was the Hailstorm rocket battery, which was inspired by Cathay fireworks, and it made some kind of not quite so reliable weapon that would send missiles off here, there, and everywhere. And I think the first time they made one, it actually blew up the workshop that they were building it in.
Good old empire reliability there.
But yeah, as you said, Jeremy, now we've got something quite solid. We've got lots of artwork, and we've got different unit types, and we've had an incredible trailer.
Absolutely. I mean, just watch that so many times. There's so much to take in and enjoy.
Yeah, and every time I watch it, I notice something a little bit different as well. It's great. If anybody watching hasn't seen the trailer, make sure you get onto the Warhammer community website and give it a watch, because it is phenomenal. Do you want to just talk us through a little bit about what we see in the trailer, Jeremy? Things that caught your eye?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a massive highlight for me was definitely the Terracotta Sentinel. So, like a massive giant warrior that the Cathay forces bring to life to fight against chaos. He's going to be armed with, I don't know if it's like a halberd or a mace, but just enough smashing down to the forces attacking. So obviously based very much on the Terracotta army that guarded one of the emperors. So that was definitely a highlight for me. How about you?
For me, the thing that caught my eye, I think, was the scale of it. It just, like, the landscape was massive with these floating islands and different fortifications and temples and castles and houses, and they showed all the different facets of life in Cathay, right down from the peasantry that are like hauling along the cannons all the way up, and it just kind of showed, I guess, that Cathay have got a lot of strength in numbers, and it helped really get immersed in the world that it's in. And then all the units that we saw, I think, were just so brilliantly designed. They had so much flavor to them. And I thought they were actually, although it's something quite new and different, it is still quite old world, I felt.
It's really interesting just to see, obviously, Warhammer the Old World is very much based around sort of very much a Western-centric historical take, and so to actually experience a culture, a more Asian-based culture, was really interesting and quite refreshing to see as well.
Yeah, I agree, and it did make me think. Where will they go from there? Will they go across to Nippon? Will they go across to Ind? Will they do Araby? Will we see these other factions later on or not? And from what I've seen so far of Cathay, I really hope that they do. I did wonder, will they do Nippon after they've done Cathay, because the aesthetic may be similar, but actually they've done the Empire and Britonia, which are both, as we'd say, kind of more Western influence. So I think there's plenty more scope for them to go further and do even more Asian culture and Asian looking units.
And this sort of actually just reminds us just how much of the Warhammer world actually we don't know about, and how much of it is still left to explore and discover, which is really exciting.
Yeah, we know absolutely nothing about the biggest empire, and we've got an army that we call the Empire. So it does tell us a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the article as well, obviously there was a lot of artwork shown and different sketches and things like that. So what were your impressions of the artwork, Jeremy?
So yeah, one of the things I really liked about it was just sort of like a different sense of like the different scale and classes. So obviously you had examples of like more peasantry, but then also you had examples of far more elites, more heavily armored troops as well. So you got a sense just of sort of different levels of society, the different scales, and just sort of like just how many diverse different unit types this army is probably going to have at its disposal, which I thought was really interesting to find out a bit more about.
What I quite liked about them was that you've got all the CGI images, and in the corner there's like a little watermark, and it says Total War Warhammer. And then when you get to the artwork, it doesn't have the Total War watermark. It's got a Warhammer the Old World watermark. So it's just great to see that this is separate from the game. This has come straight from the Games Workshop design studio. And this is something that we could easily see placed in a rule book or an army book. And what's also cool about it is that when you look at it, there's also different variants. So I'm looking at one picture here, which is for an infantry type, and they've got a spear or a choice for a crossbow or a shield, and it's got it all kind of laid out almost like it's on a sprue already, ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really nice because this is pretty much like giving us a preview of the game, of the miniature game. Who knows how many months or years ahead, but it's just really nice to get that sneak peek of what's the design studios at the moment. They
say that the lead time for a faction is about 2 years. So I don't know how long the lead time will be for a whole game. It kind of depends. Sometimes they can be really quick. For example, the guys that write the rules for Lord of the Rings, they can put books together and campaign books together really quickly. But I think, they're working on an existing rule set and they're just tweaking and modifying. I think, if you're starting from the ground up, they did say when they started it's going to take a while, but fingers crossed for me is next year. I think if we get this out by the end of next year, I'll be over the moon, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait.
So shall we talk about the units that we saw and what we think of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to talk about? I know you're very impressed by the air balloons. Do you want to tell us about them?
Yeah, I was really impressed with the air balloons. That they're the first thing that really, really caught my eye. I just absolutely love the aesthetic of them. I love that they look like Chinese lanterns. I was just blown away by how cool they were. And then when they started firing their missiles out from them, I just thought that was fantastic. And it's cool to see an aerial war, because you could have flying units fight flying units, but you never felt that there was kind of air-to-air combat, or there's a potential here, for dogfighting with gyrocopters or something like that. I would like to know actually, what is more reliable, an air balloon or a gyrocopter? Which will go where you want it to go better, and which one is more likely to fall out of the sky? Because I don't think either of them are going to be particularly reliable, but nevertheless, they do both look really, really cool.
They do look really good. And I'm just thinking about, I know it's almost silly to be talking about realism and physics in the game, which is based on fantasy, but just imagine these cannons firing and the recoil, which would knock these air balloons out of the sky. but who cares? It's fun, and that's the main thing. Cool wins out, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I really enjoyed about it was just how disciplined and trained the infantry was. So it starts off obviously with this fantastic volley of handguns and cannon fire into the force of chaos, and then they pull back, and then the spearmen sort of take the lead, ready to brace themselves for the charge. So yeah, I really like that sort of interplay between missile troops and infantry, and hopefully we'll have some cool rules that reflect that on the battlefield. And just on that, it was really interesting to see what the missile fire was like, and it was a bit more sort of fireworky. It seemed like there was lots of sparks and things flying off them. So it'd be interesting to see whether there's some sort of rule to reflect, I don't know, like flashes and bangs going off and like dazzling, or like, I don't know, setting things on fire as missile weapons hit the enemy as well.
Yeah, it was almost like they were sort of like almost like grenade launchers rather than your typical guns. And I think, that could be represented, potentially, maybe it could do like D3 wounds instead of 1 or 2. So whoever, if they get lucky and they're caught near a group of people, it might do a blast and hit 3 or something like that. Would be quite cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I was almost imagining like a stun grenade going off, and like people like just being like, "What the hell is that?" And that's not like, I don't know, yeah, disrupting their ability to function properly.
Speaking of that, Jeremy, did you see the cannon that they were hauling through the streets, the guys?
So first of all, I just love the idea of the cannon just being carried across. I think it's by a large cowl bull, and I just like that kind of like almost like domestic side of it, just just of how these things travel day to day. Because obviously Warhammer is generally seen in a military context, but to see that sort of like domestic setting first of all was really cool. But yeah, I loved how ornate it was and the carvings, and again you got that sense of like that rich culture and history of the weapon as well. It looked, yes, a lot more fun than your typical Empire Great Cannon. So yeah, good stuff.
Looking forward to seeing how it plays. It looks like cannons are going to be more commonplace in this game, because obviously Empire have got cannons, and then when they showed off Kislev have got a cannon, and now Cathay have got a cannon. So I can remember before they were kind of quite specialist, and there were a lot of armies that either didn't or wouldn't use them. And the Bretonians, they cannons and guns, they're not chivalrous enough for them. So, but now we've got armies that are all in for cannons. So I'd be interested to see how they work, and if they have any other kinds, something of their own missile battery or something like that. So hopefully see some different kinds of cannon as well as the one that we've seen.
Absolutely. I think it's time possibly for both of us to collect an army with a bit more durability, Dan, because it's not looking very good for us, is it?
No. I don't think we can talk about the units without mentioning Mao Ying herself, the Storm Dragon. So she is the special character that they revealed, and she is charged with defending the northern border from the relentless incursions of chaos. She commands the armies of the Great Bastion, which is a towering magical wall constructed by her father, who is a dragon, and also so is she.
And not only someone who could transform into dragon, but also looks like she can, like a dragon which can send out lightning as well. So yeah, plenty of tricks there.
Yeah, and what's great is that she's the daughter, so obviously they're going to be parent dragons. How many of these kinds of dragons will we see? And the other thing about them that I really liked, and that they talked about when they were talking to the design team a bit, is they were saying that these dragons are first and foremost the emperors and the leaders. They would never ever consider, even for a minute, that a human would ride on their back. The humans are the people who they rule over. And it's cool to see that. It's something that's happening in Age of Sigmar as well, actually, a little bit, where dragons are now not to be seen as just like beasts to be tamed and ridden. In their own right, they're more kind of Tolkien-esque, where they're intelligent, and they're just much more, I don't really know what the word is, much more magnificent, I suppose.
Yeah, they're individuals in their own right, and they're with their own minds and will and personality. Yeah. And again, it's one of those things which sort of separates out Cathay nicely from the race we know already. Where yes, they are very much a very powerful beast of burden, but nevertheless they are a vehicle to get the rider from A to B. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is just about all of the units that we saw. Oh no, we did see some wizards, didn't we, Jeremy? We saw a couple
Yeah,
of
so
wizards.
we saw two different wizard types. One of which I think was an alchemist, and one was I think they called him an astromancer. Or astrological mancer. So it looks like it's going to be two different magical laws that Cathay's going to have access to at the very least. And they mentioned sort of like having some sort of like yin yang element as well. So I wonder whether you have to have these two wizards in your army to sort of give the army some sort of bonus or benefit to be channeling both of these laws. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they operate and what they can do. Maybe the alchemists are responsible for sort of bringing like the terracotta sentinels and that sort of thing to life, perhaps.
The alchemist, it kind of reminds me there was a wizard type in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and they had all these different spells and things that they could do. And for example, one of the spells was they had all the elements that they needed to create the spells.
Mhm.
So one of them was if they wanted to do like Mage Light, what they would do is they would have a match and a scratchy surface, and then they would cast a spell Mage Light and things like that. So I wonder if the alchemist is going to be like that, got all their potions and all their things lined up, but actually there might not be too much magic to it. I doubt it, but
See.
we'll see. So how do you think this army is going to play on the tabletop? We've already spoken a little bit about the how disciplined we think the units are going to be and how vast the units are going to be. So for me, I'm thinking that we're going to see perhaps not a horde type army, because we have seen some elite choices, but your infantry units, I think there are going to be quite a lot, or they're going to be quite cheap.
I think it's definitely going to be a sort of an infantry heavy army from what we can tell, and we should probably say that we are recording this before the roster is revealed by Total War. So in a week's time, this might be totally out of date, but as at the time of writing, we're speculating. But yeah, I'm assuming some sort of like infantry-based force, obviously with a very heavy missile component to it as well. The team at Total War suggested it's an army that could quite easily be flanked. So I'm assuming a lack of like mobile infantry, maybe mobile cavalry, and sort of perhaps like limited fast cavalry and that sort of thing. But certainly one with probably enough firepower to keep your flanks fairly safe, because the enemy will be dead.
Yeah, we didn't see any kind of scouting infantry or scouting cavalry in there whatsoever. It was just these big solid blocks. But there's got, if you've got a sentinel on your flank, then surely you don't have to worry about it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I've been thinking about actually is I'll be really interested to see how Games Workshop make the army different to the Empire, because like on paper you could say, oh, there's the similarities there, they're both infantry heavy, they both got strong sort of gunpowder elements to them. So I'll be really interested to see what makes this army distinct from the Empire, because you don't want it just to be like a simple reskin, and there's definitely opportunities to make something really exciting and different and unique here.
Yeah, and something we were talking about before we started recording was how it's visually represented on the tabletop, where you've got this, you do have your big monsters, kind of your equivalent of your giant in the Terracotta Sentinel, and you've got flying units, and there was some sort of flying cavalry that we saw that we don't quite know what that is yet. So it'll have all different levels. I think it will look quite spectacular on the tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got naturally an army where you've got things flying, you've got infantry, you've got some larger set pieces, you've got some massive war machines. So it feels really, you can just imagine it like in a shop window, and it sounds visually really eye catching and exciting. And I could just imagine like the starter box sets now for it. So it sounds really exciting, very shrewd, and definitely an exciting moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we said, the whole roster hasn't been revealed just yet. We've got another week. So, there are some things that we were talking about that we would quite like to see. I was having a think about some of the stuff that I'd read in the lore, just having a look on the Warhammer wiki and stuff like that, and it talked about giant stone dogs, and these are the kinds that you might see like outside a Buddhist temple or something like that, guarding the entranceways. They can be animated and come to life, and that's something that I'd like to see. Maybe you could have a unit of 3 of them, and they might be like a monstrous unit or something like that.
Sounds a bit similar to like the sort of construct that the Tomb Kings had, something maybe along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was thinking back. I don't know a huge amount about Chinese military history, but I did remember that, and I'm going to pronounce this really badly, but the Chinese did actually invent something called the repeating crossbow, called the Chu Ku Nu, which is basically a crossbow with like a magazine, so that it could fire bolts a lot faster than standard crossbow. And I was wondering whether we might see the fantasy equivalent of that materialize for Cathay. Obviously, the Dark Elves have their own iteration of that, but it'd be really nice to see whether there's a sort of a human equivalent of the repeating crossbow. And again, that seems like a sort of a really useful weapon to sort of keep the hordes of chaos at bay.
I think I'd like to see, I guess this isn't really a unit, but I guess I'd like to see more of the rules, because we know that the design team have already made Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition rules for all the units that we've seen. And like you said, talking about the magic users and stuff like that, there's things that I would like to see how they work. Again, reading in the lore, there was a bit where the wizards of Cathay created a magical tidal wave that came along, and it was so big that it sunk a black ark.
Well, I don't like the sound of that.
So I'd like to see, and I'd like to see more rules and more things like that. But I think you were saying, Jeremy, weren't you, that you had a look at the FAQ for Total War, which might give us more of an insight into that.
Yeah, so it does mention cavalry in some capacity. So there's definitely going to be some sort of mounted units available to them as well. Obviously, in 7th edition we've got references to monks, so I'd be interested to see whether there's something along those lines. I remember once going to see the Terracotta Army exhibition when it came to the British Museum, so I would love to see something along those lines. But maybe that's too predictable an idea. But yeah, that'll be on my wish list for sure.
I think they'll probably just leave it at the Sentinel rather than create a whole army of terracotta units, because I think that kind of play style and army will fall more into death, I think, than a human faction.
That is a strong argument, actually. Yeah,
it is something that they definitely ought to be able to do, but I just don't know if it's something that they would choose to do, I suppose. Yeah. And just lastly, I just wanted to talk about, there's a lot of chatter going on various different media platforms about this game, and some people are suggesting that maybe this new game coming out is creeping away from what Warhammer the Old World, what Warhammer Fantasy Battles was like, and becoming a bit too high fantasy and looking a bit more like Age of Sigmar. I think personally, I don't feel from what I've seen of this army so far that is the case. We already have giants, we already have flying units, we already have rocket batteries. Everything that we've seen so far seems to fit. I think the scale of the monsters in this army, maybe the dragon might be like the biggest dragon that we've ever seen, but it still makes sense within the lore that would be the case. I mean, we're talking about a dragon, the Dragon Emperor of Cathay. Is a massive, I can't remember what they're called. They're a celestial dragon or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
But they're a massive celestial dragon, and they are older than the old ones, and they've been around for a long time, and you should feel the presence of that, I think. I just hope that for someone that's been around longer than the old ones, they've got a better memory than a slan.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, yeah, we want something majestic, but it's also just nice to have something which has got which predates the old ones, and and sort of dates back to the world before it was was moved closer to the sun, and the continents were remade in the old one's image. So that is really interesting, exciting to learn more about, have that sort of history. I mean, I don't think we'll probably ever see the Dragon Emperor, because he is a god, in the same way that you would never actually see Khorne or Nurgle actually manifest themselves directly on the table, because that would be game over pretty much. But it's still really nice to have those powerful forces in the background and sort of see their children directly interacting in the world and their descendants being playable. I think that'd be really cool. I mean, very much my take, just going back to sort of the high fantasy side of it, is that obviously it doesn't really feel like we're really comparing like for like at the moment. So we're basing all the speculation on a 2 or 3 minute trailer for a computer game. It's not the same as seeing, you know, printed out miniatures on a battlefield, you know, in 28mm scale. So I think I'll definitely hold fire until we see the models. But like you said, you know, Warhammer has, you know, flying units, it has monstrous units, and as technology has improved, we've been able to see, you know, more fantastical and larger models. So yeah, I look forward to seeing the real things on the table.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I think that brings us just about to the end. Please let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on Cathay, what you like the most out of the trailer, what you're looking forward to see from them. If they're an army you're interested in collecting, we are going to do a catch-up, a kind of whatever episode this is. Did I say this was episode 8 or episode 7? Whichever one it is, we're going to do a 0.5 afterwards, and we're going to catch up and see what the whole army roster looks like and what we think of it when that is revealed next week. So be sure to tune in for that. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and then that way, if you click the bell icon, you'll know when we do it straight away. All right, so thank you very much for watching, and thank you again, Jeremy, for being co-host. It's great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to recording with you again next week.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great.